time to take a look at the week in review, and of course we're midway some hot discussions, and we are on to Mr. Osiani, who was giving us his take on Oscar Sudi's very outspoken nature in Kenyan politics. And of course, if you have any residue opinion on that, this is your chance.
I have very little regard for people who spew vitriol.
Yeah.
People who are flippant, who are not consistent, who one time they're on this side of the course, the other time they want to shift base to the other side.
Yeah. If
Oscar Sudi had said he wants to fight against graft, he should have been the first person to ask Rotich, Mr. Rotich, 19 billion has been misappropriated, allegedly so, for a dam that would have reformed the lives of the people of Elgeyo and Marakwet, your home county. Where is the money? And he would not be quick to speak until and unless this has been resolved. It cannot be that at one point you want to support maize farmers when it's politically expedient, and at another point you want to disenfranchise the very people you pretend to support. Mr. Sudi, who is known to me personally, I must state, says that he would do well with Moses Kuria. The Moses Kuria, who is a very good friend of mine again, but who stood and told guys to pick pangas when the NYS investigations were being made. People who do not have brakes for their mouths and brains are dangerous for this country. You cannot go on an overdrive in a particular tangent without asking what are going to be the consequences of my utterances. You must be able to stop and ask yourself, for whose good am I speaking? Is it for the good of the greater public, or is it for the good of an individual? You know, when Oscar says that the fight against graft seems to be targeting one community, then I wonder whether the CEO of NEMA, who also has been enlisted, comes from his community. I ask myself whether Mwangi, the former CEO of NHIF, comes from his county. I ask myself whether the former director of finance for Kenya Pipeline, Mr. Okumu, comes from his country, his county, or is his kinsman and tribesman. We must not reduce grand wars against graft to a parochial, tiny bit of a view that it is merely tribal. But it also speaks to the bigger problem in this country, that when we have opportunities, we do not spread the risk. We come and carry the whole village. We forget that there are 42 tribes in this country. We put people into office. When now time comes for them to be hounded out, I mean, the damage is so massive. You end up ejecting a whole village. Why? Because you did not have the decorum and dignity to think that Atharaka and Anjem are consistency, at least for me. If he had stuck on his, let's protect maize farmers. This time maize farmers have been making noise when there was a purported near importation of maize of 12 million bags. I expected him to still get back and say, when it comes to maize, remember, I will be the #1 fighter. But when he says he will be president, his track record in parliament as a legislator is wanting. He has never spoken in parliament. His track record as a member of parliament is not inspiring. So,
unfortunately, we are in times where it doesn't matter what you say, the more controversial, the more likely you're going to be in the papers. And today's paper actually is reflecting that, because he's on the whole of page 4 is about him. The top story is disquiet in Jubilee over Sudi remark on Uhuru Ruto bond, and that's when he said that the marriage is on the rocks. And then at the bottom there, we're given a whole profile of him, and we're told former tout with acid tongue spares no one. And then the quote about him being able to be
the tragedy of populism is that sometimes we may celebrate you as you drive us right into a ditch. It is how Trump ascended. It is the script that has been for Bojo, Boris Johnson.
Yes.
And it is how Sonko is governor. It is how Oscar Sudi hopes that he can be the next big thing in Rift Valley. I had rather had a little bit of sobriety. Even Murkomen is a loyalist. He jumps when he's told to jump, but he has conscience to be able to guard himself from these extremes. So I at least if Oscar has to learn from another Kipchumba, because he's also Kipchumba, let him take a few lessons from Kipchumba Murkomen on how to be slightly decent even when you disagree.
Yeah, and
and for me, I think for me the other question becomes, whose song or whose drum is he beating? Because and who exactly is he representing? Because a lot of times you find that there are bigger fish who would rather not make such statements but have their spanner boys to do that work for them. And so my concern is, who is he representing? Whose views is he pushing? Because I would want to believe that if Oscar Sudi was aligned to a different political movement or was in a different political camp, he would not be making such statements.
Right.
All I want to know is this: why is a section of Jubilee monopolizing corruption? That if you say fight against corruption, they are the first ones to raise their hands and say you are targeting us. You know, let me tell you, if I say there's a thief on the bench and Magal complains, you know, I don't understand. You know, when you say we are
you're targeting my people.
They're fixing me.
What do you mean?
And your people. And then again, remember the DPP. Just before you say, I remember the DPP once when there were all these talks about the fight against corruption targeting a particular community. There's a time he actually came out and gave a list of the people who had been indicted of corruption in the past, and the list did not reflect any one singular
but
community.
According to this side of Jubilee, the moment you get arrested for corruption, you get baptized into their community. That's what they've assumed.
Mr. Magal, I want you to come into the conversation.
This, to me, is another form of diversionary tactics.
Okay.
And as you can see, the much time we've been preoccupied speaking about Sudi instead of speaking about the fight against corruption. What the government did this week was to send a very clear message that the fight against corruption is on. I think the biggest casualty so far is CS Rotich. He's beaten the dust, he's out of the office, and I expect more to come. I think that should be the focus of the national debate.
Yes.
Secondly, it has brought up another issue, and that is generally corruption within the cabinet and what the president ought to do with this particular cabinet. Last week we were here speaking about the incompetence and corruption perverse within it. And I think it is a high time we called upon the president to dissolve that particular cabinet and come up with a list of individuals who are competent, who are clean, that is more inclusive, to make him deliver on his promise, on the big four.
Absolutely.
He has only 3 years, and if he is not keen enough, if he doesn't make appointments that inspire confidence, if he doesn't throw out the characters that we have been complaining about over and over again, then in another 3 years, we'll be back here talking about corruption, talking about incompetence, and the country will have lost.
Absolutely,
Tricks,
Mr. Magal.
it is important to note, I'm sorry we should be getting out of this. Oscar Sudi has time upon number alleged that the people who are coming to the table of equity are not coming with clean hands, and that there seems to be a section of leaders that are being spared in this war against graft, and that he knows. Alisema, nyinyi ndio waizi wakubwa zaidi. Tunajua zile maneno mnafanya. I want Oscar, if he truly is a consistent leader, I want Oscar to today, this very day, go give us evidence, get a press conference, and you guys should hound him out of his hole and tell him to give you evidence of the goings on, because we really need to fix this country. And the president said, woe unto you, even if you're my brother.
Yes.
If you're corrupt, I'll deal with you. So he should help us in that regard, instead of taking us round in circles.
And speaking of clean hands, I would like us to stop talking about Oscar Sudi. It's enough. I mean,
I wasn't going to say about Oscar Sudi, but it's okay.
Let's pivot to another. But speaking of clean hands, he is actually still on page 5, and we're talking about his forged papers, and he's been in and out of court because he's facing charges that he, according to the prosecution, the MP forged his diploma in business management, allegedly issued by the Kenya Institute of Management, as well as the Kenya Certificate of Secondary Education. Now, I mean, we're talking about him. He's
by ESCC, the failings by IEBC to properly vet these particular individuals and save the nation and save us from them. You know, and just when these institutions start to work, they start fighting against them.
Then we'll be moving somewhere. Now, speaking of the war on corruption, let's get a sound bite from one of the authorities, Nurdin Haj, if I'm not wrong, who had some sentiments about the war on corruption before we get into the discussion that will surround the arrest and prosecution or investigation into CS Henry Rotich's graft allegations, and of course his replacement, albeit temporary.
Bwana Haja Habi, sio mnajua, lazima nizungumze tena zaidi, lakini waacha nitasema so that they know and it is on record. I have been fighting to ask those people that we have charged to step aside. They must step aside, and that is in the Constitution, and it's a right that we have to ask. We are not pleading. We charge you, you must step aside. And we will go all the way to the Supreme Court if we have to get that ruling. Hakuna kubembelezana. Unakuja kucharge. I saw a question here that why are you not focusing on the counties? But we put 2 test cases. And you know kila saa lazima kwanza strategy yetu ni kutest the waters. You just don't rush. So that you know. Otherwise, kama wananchi mtatulaumu ya kwamba tumepeleka hao magavana wote na wako huko nje. Tumepeleka kesi 2. Moja ya mada na ingine ya ufisadi. But they are out there. Ya nani? Itakuja. Wacha kwanza nikwambie. Hakuna itakuja. Na zote zitakuja. Lakini kwanza lazima tujue shida iko wapi, na wananchi wafahamu shida ni nini, si ndio? Tumewacharge governors, wametoka nje, wana raha yao, wanatembea, wameanza kufuta watu kazi. Wewe yani wanawasema wewe ni witness against me na unafanya kazi kwa county, shika karatasi uende. Wewe ni witness, utaona, unaanza kutishwa. Wewe ni kitu fulani, mimi ndio mtu mkubwa wa county, utaona. Hata imefika kiwango ambayo tunaletewa fake documents kusema ati nyinyi hamuna evidence, na hiyo ni fake. Na ukitaka kuonesha kwamba hiyo ni fake, ndio hizo orders. Na ukitaka kusema watoke, ndio hizo orders. Hiyo sio sawa, na wala tutapigana mpaka tupate uhaki na usawa.
Right, now that's DPP Nurdin Haj, who has been actually hailed for the recent arrest of top government officials, including the National Treasury Cabinet Secretary Henry Rotich. We have the Principal Secretary Kamau Thugo, East African Community PS Susan Koech, and former Kerio Valley Development Authority Managing Director David Kimosop, among others. Now, this has made news from Monday all the way till today. We're still talking about it. I want to know your sentiments about the recent developments in the war against corruption, Mr. Bichachi.
One of the things that I think a lot of people have missed, when Rotich was first appointed, everyone knew that he was Uhuru's pick, because he was Uhuru's right-hand man when he was in the ministry, and he's been associated with Uhuru for a long time.
Yeah.
So how it turned that when Uhuru, when Rotich is arrested, it is now DP's camp that is being affected is a strange thing to me. I do not understand.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. Because we know for a fact, for a historical fact, that Rotich was closer to the president than he was to the DP.
But you yourself have just quoted him having said, somebody has said it, that he said, it doesn't matter if you're my brother.
Exactly. And that's what I'm saying. So the most significant thing that Kenyans should notice is that that brother has been arrested.
Yes.
So that should tell you how serious the president is. Number two, we cannot assume the gift that we've been given by Justice Mumbi in saying that governors need to step aside. In more civilized societies, if a train crashes in Marsabit, the Minister of Transport resigns as though he knows how to drive a train, because he understands the responsibility he carries. That for him, the moral decision and the right moral decision is to step down. It is only in Kenya where CS can tell you to go to hell and he's still here on earth enjoying first-class services. That is the problem. Number three, there's this thing that we are propagating in the fight against corruption called whataboutism. As though in class 3, you are caught making noise by the teacher. Then you say, yesterday, Ruth Ambogo was also making noise. So unless she's also punished, I'm not going to take my punishment. So should the police stop prosecuting thieves because they've not arrested all the thieves?
You just deal with your own
deal with the one that you've caught. And that's how it must be. You set an example. You understand? Then the idea that somehow being elected makes your office immune to stepping down is ridiculous. Because the fact, and this tells you the kind of people we elect, that they have no moral compass to even, listen, we have governors who apparently can't see. We've got governors with murder charges. I'm not joking murder charges. Your phone has been located there. You were seen there. Your PA was seen there. As in, literally you were caught with sugar all over your mouth and you're still in office. When even your bail terms do not even allow you to attend a devolution conference 2 kilometers away from your house.
I know.
What kind of service are you giving the people of your county? So for me, the wins are many. We must keep them.
And we must laud them and praise where it's due. Ms. Ambogo, could you please give me a sentiment?
I think for me, I am very excited that in a way, for once, it appears as if all the key players in the fight against corruption are in harmony to fight corruption as it stands right now. We have seen, we saw a judgment issued, a ruling issued by Justice Mumbi Ngugi, which I was very excited about, first and foremost being the fact that it was coming from a woman who is very revolutionary in her rulings and has set precedent and standards standards and has put her foot down in declaring that governors and state officers who are indicted or charged with corruption should step aside. I think that's a huge step in the right direction, and we are also seeing the DPP, acting. Basically, in short, we are seeing all the arms of government coming to play to fight corruption. Because the problem usually is, in the fight against corruption, the problem usually is there's usually a blame game between these three bodies: the EACC, the DPP's office, the DCI's office, as well as the judiciary. With the EACC, with the DPP blaming the EACC for not conducting proper investigations, and also blaming the DCI in matters criminal for not conducting proper investigations. The judiciary saying that we cannot charge and prosecute if we don't have proper evidence. So my hope is that the only way that we shall avoid this conversation around the DPP's office being used as basically as a hatchet to hack off people's necks in the name of 2022 politics is if these four independent bodies will sustain that momentum, will sustain that effort, and at the end of the day that we shall see at least people being charged and assets being recovered. And for me, the main focus should not just be on arresting these individuals, prosecuting them and charging them, but also recovering of the assets, because at the end of the day, the charge against corruption is one that involves money that has either been squandered, money that has been lost. So at the end of the day, what is most important is, can we get this money recovered? And then again, I would also bring the discussion back to the focus on what is the source of corruption. Can we deal with corruption from its source, because
before you even get to the courts and the blame game.
In as much as I allowed Justice Mumbi Ngugi's judgment that if governors are if governors are charged for corruption, they should step aside and their deputies take over. My worry is that what if these deputy governors are actually part and parcel of this, of the graft that we are talking about? So what ends up happening? So we need to fight corruption from its source. We need to fight corruption from the budgeting process, because I think corruption has been institutionalized in this country. It begins from the budgeting process. It begins from tendering, the tendering processes within the county government levels and even within ministries. So if we can deal with it from the source itself,
I think even from a moral level and from an integrity level, I think, as Mr. Bichachi said. Mr. Magal.
It has been a great week for me. It's been a great week in the fight against corruption. In the last 5 or 7 years, I've waited for this day. The dominoes have begun to fall. I can say that this particular CS shouldn't be the last that we'll see in court. There are more out there that are corrupt and should be made to face justice. As regards the tenure of governors who've been charged for any crime before any court, I think I would like to throw the gauntlet at the MCAs who are supposed to act as a check against the county executive. None of these county assemblies has started a motion or has put in motion the process of impeaching any of these governors. Tells you that the MCAs and the governors are in bed together. They are in it together. They are pilfering, they are stealing from the very people that they are supposed to be representing. I expected the Migori governor to be home by today. There are so many people that can lead that particular county. I expected the governor of Samburu to have been impeached and be home today. But I can tell you for a fact that none of these county assemblies has even discussed, leave alone consider
thought of it.
A motion for an impeachment.
My question is, when you look at other countries, talk about South Korea, talk about Brazil in the past few years, talk about South Africa with Jacob Zuma and Kandler and all that. We have even the people going to the streets,
and demonstrating and overturning government.
Is like, no,
the only time we here in Kenya, it seems, run to the streets is when a government comes up with a good proposal, like the affordable housing. That is when you'll see Kenyans rush to court to block it. When the government,
good point.
That is the only time you will see the so-called activists who think that all their work involved is to oppose government projects will run to the streets. I expect people in the street demanding the resignation by the CS. I mean, he owes it to the country. He owes it to the president. Why is he still in the office? Another point that I would like to raise is the judiciary. You know, it has taken a lot of beatings from various quarters as being the
weakest
hindrance in the fight against corruption. But then we'll have to admit the fact that they are greatly underfunded. You know, they are receiving, I think, 18.6 billion in budgetary allocations, yet they are supposed to employ more people. They are supposed to develop more infrastructure and adopt the use of technology. But I would like to urge the CJ that in cases involving corruption, not only should they be expedited, but he should adopt the use of technology. Instead of having records taken down in writing, we should have, what are they called?
Transcribers.
Yes, we should have transcribers so that, you know, it should be a pilot project within the judiciary such that these particular cases can be run much faster, develop the public confidence in the administration of justice and win the public over. Otherwise, as it is, they will continue to take the blame because we cannot have matters. Take, for example, the Anglo-leasing matter. It has been in court for almost 10 years now. No resolution in sight.
Right, and I'm curious about the opposition's role when it comes to this and demanding that people step aside. I mean, this would where I'd expect a robust opposition to come in and said, you know what, this person needs, and keep talking about it in Parliament until something happens.
Do we have an opposition?
Do we have an opposition?
The Constitution does not
create an office.
There is no opposition in this country. We have majority and minority. It is assumed, therefore, that the minority in Parliament ought to be the opposition. That's why part of what needs to be done is to have a referendum to make these changes, to anchor them in law, so that then you have official opposition which can enlist shadow cabinet, you know, like it is in the UK Parliament. Shadow cabinet that counterchecks what the other side does, comes with proposals on what should be done differently. Listen, if Nurdin, Kinoti, Twalib, and those recently appointed reformists should fail, they will have succeeded in creating deterrence. What Nurdin has done is to demonstrate that he didn't care. You can go and save yourself in court if you so wish. You may go and bribe, if at all the judges are going to be corrupt as they have been accused of being, some of them. But I will have embarrassed you, stripped you down in front of the country and shown them that you're a thief. Your children will go around knowing very well that my father was a thief.
Okay.
I like the ruling by Justice Mumbingoge. And the war against corruption has gotten a massive boost in the arrest of a CS, a PS, you know. I remember when Rebecca Nabutola, the former PS for tourism, was thrown in jail for 3 years for just swindling 8.4 million. And if that same judge were to listen to this case of 19 billion, I don't know how many years will be spent in jail. If there is going to be clear demonstration, and I hope that Nurdin is able to get, you know, people, a prosecutorial team that will render that case with absolute perfection and exactitude. Because if they do not, then it will be, the DPP will be scorned. But so far, the success in creating deterrence, in stopping possible other small thefts, in reducing theft by the very virtue that a CS can be kicked out of office has been immense. Now, to Mumbingoge's ruling, I do not know what will happen to MPs who swindle CDF. Because what you are saying is, yes, governors need to step aside once they are before court, and I support that. But in the contrary, and those in the legal profession, before I mature up in that area, will say, what happens when the MP, who is a custodian of the national government CDF, Constituency Development Fund, misappropriates funds? Will he step aside? Because both of them are elected leaders. It would seem to me that there will be, you know, it may end up being twofold, or it may end up being unfair to governors if the members of parliament are not hounded out of office for the same mistakes that they have done, which is to swindle county resources and other many things. We had this guy who was a rapist. His case just died. I don't know where he went to, that Meru MP. We need to get to a point, and all of us must agree, the moment we start to fix this country and fighting graft, it's going to hit close home. We need to deal with it. It's going to come for our friends, those we cherish, those who will make us think twice whether we want to stand here and say very boldly, arrest them. It will hit close and hit home. But regardless of how close it hits, it is best for country.
And speaking of corruption, let's move on to KPLC. Now, it is said that a lot of the losses that they made was after tokens were stolen and sold to consumers. And now the firm is insisting that the consumers who stole the stolen tokens, who used up the stolen tokens, will be the one bearing the burden. It seems unfair to me. Mr. Michachi, what do you feel about this one?
You know, Kenya Power is a place where there's a lot of comedy of errors. There is transformers, there is the price of power, there's the fact that today, if you take a voltmeter and measure the voltage of coming into your house, it's rarely the standard voltage. It's either above or below what is supposed to be there. So KPLC is the place where you can see the abuse of monopoly running rampant. And the senator spoke about this, and I agree with him. Number one is, if the fraud was perpetuated by members of your staff, it must be first, the brand must first be borne by them. But number two, these tokens were not bought using side numbers.
Yes.
These were KPLC numbers.
Exactly.
Okay?
Yeah.
They were contracts that KPLC had entered with second-party vendors and even consciously made their 8880 number not work well so that we could all buy from these other vendors. Let's just be honest to the country. That's what KPLC did. So now you created a platform for you to be robbed, okay? And the person who was buying this token from a number you've listed on your website, okay, is then being punished. Let's look at a company called Safaricom, okay? Safaricom had a similar blunder the other day, okay, when their system failed, okay? They did not do anything much. They dealt with their internal systems. We don't know who was fired. We don't know what happened with Safaricom. They dealt with it. And then they came to you and they said, by the way, out of the 32 GB of data, there's 30 GB you've not spent. We're taking it back. That is the proper way of handling your own mistakes. KPLC should understand that they made their bed, let them lie in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're being told in the papers that from an insider that it is revealed that with the knowledge of the system, the employees under investigation were able to generate tokens sold cheaply to third-party merchants, as Mr. Bichachi has said, at the expense of the company. And the employees are said to have connived to generate the tokens and create loopholes that facilitated the sale of genuine tokens in the black market. Ms. Ambogo.
If a quick look at the KPLC's website reveals that they do have an ethics and integrity program within KPLC. And one would want to wonder, what exactly are they teaching their employees? Because by an ethics and integrity program, I'm guessing that, you know, once new employees come in, they are told this is how we do things here. This is a code that we abide to. And this brings in question the questions that what kind of management that does KPLC have? Forget about even the tokens that were stolen and sold to Kenyans, and Kenyans have to pay for it. KPLC has a wide array of issues facing this, you know, this one particular corporate or rather company. The other day we saw their management or leadership in court, and something interesting happened when their bail hearing was going on, that lights went off at Milimani Law Courts. And you know, and this you know, for me I found this very, very interesting. And for me I just it makes me shed light on, it makes me want to ask questions such as what kind of management does KPLC have, and does KPLC need an overhaul, because it does indeed need an overhaul. Just the other day we saw a section of Kenyans, you know, rioting and rather conducting demonstrations in town about the overbilling of customers at KPLC. But then another question also comes into play in the sense that there was another case of over 200 customers as well as staff members of KPLC charged for rather conspiring to steal from KPLC. And by customers we mean we Kenyans as well. That apparently allegedly there are over 5,000 customers of KPLC who are in cohorts with KPLC staff members to overbill them and basically make money out of it. So KPLC overcharges you, and you're in agreement, rather the staff members overcharge you, and you're in agreement that when the money comes, you all get shares of the money. So the other question is that, are we really, we as citizens, can we really come and you know, start complaining about the corruption and fraud that is ongoing in KPLC when we ourselves are part of it, you know?
But let me ask a question. How long does it take an electronic system to figure out that you've given out money, tokens worth 2,000, but you only paid 500? How did it take so long?
Now, we have a very interesting cartoon in the Standard by Gado, and it is Energy Justice now.
Page 14.
Yes, on page 14, Says Keter resign, switch off KPLC, arrest, prosecute, convict, and recover assets. We've had so many problems with KPLC.
Yes.
It is an energy, it is a company dealing with the energy, and it's a monopoly. You know, the other day when there was a thread going around on Twitter that a Kenyan should be appointed to Safaricom. KPLC sprang to mind. KPLC, everybody uses electricity in Kenya. If there's any company that should be turning billions upon billions in profit, it's KPLC.
Yes.
I mean, the world over, the companies that are, take General Electricity, take all the companies throughout the world, the companies that are racking in profits are in the energy sector.
The cartoon editorial that Mr. Magal is talking
about,
what's on your screen right
it's
now,
quite apt.
Energy justice now.
But what do we see in Kenya? KPLC records losses year in, year out. And what is the problem?
Now we know
the
why.
problem is, again, our politics.
Yes.
We have a politician was appointed to head that particular sector. He appointed his village mates, okay, to the key sections. And we saw this the other day when they were arraigned, and that's when they started the hue and cry about Watuwetu na our community being targeted. And that is the bane of our nation. It is replicated in all the other ministries. It is replicated in all the other parastatals and all the other monopolies. If these companies was to be run as efficiently and as innovatively as Safaricom, I can tell you KPLC would be one of the companies raking in the most profits in the whole of Africa, not just Kenya.
I forget who, but one of the officials at the hearing cautioned them and reminded them of Telkom. And he said, this is the type of thing that we warned Telkom against, but they did not listen. They had monopoly. But of course, with these kinds of loophole, they didn't make it through to today's market. And you know what's going on.
You know, when you talk about Telkom, people forget that what is today Safaricom was a department of Telkom.
Imagine that.
What is today a multi-billion and leading organization, corporate organization, was a department of Telkom. It's the issue of governance. You know, these little employees have seen their bosses steal billions and they ask themselves, why are we remaining?
We should also do it.
Yeah, the bosses are stealing, they're looting in billions, they go before court, they are never convicted, they go home. The least they will do is to resign, then go and enjoy the loot with their children in Singapore, in Seychelles, in Miami. Then why not us? And that is the tragedy of leadership. You lead by example. There hasn't been example setting in the country as regards governance for so long that people do not have someone to emulate. The people they have to emulate are the ones that are doing all the wrong things, and all of them want to play catch up. They look at their young colleagues who have risen up the ranks without qualification simply because of nepotism. And when they get up there, they loot so much money and ask themselves, but I was defeating this one in class. Does hard work pay in this country? People, if you go to somewhere like the Kenya Revenue Authority, you realize everyone wants to work in the customs and they don't want to even be promoted. They just want to be officers. So that they can go and look for this, businessman who has defaulted in paying tax, who has defaulted to the tune of 400 million. Once they get him, they tell him, you've defaulted in 400 million, pay KRA 100 million, but give me 50 million of my own, we will sort out this case. And it goes unpunished until recently, of course, when Kinoti decided to walk in there and just grab those who he thought were guilty. And I hope they will be convicted. Listen, the society has made stealing look fashionable because no one questions. You have mothers who look at their children living a lifestyle that they know very well does not match what they say they do, but they do not question it. You have pastors who go and celebrate when we get home with big monies, and they do not ask where has the money come from. Why? Because they have seen the political class showing up with money that is unexplained, and they are part of the mess, and they so badly want to eat the loot that they forget to play the role they should play of being the check and the balance of society. Right from the floors of our house, you have partners that do not hold each other to account. So my wife comes home, or I get home, and no one is going to ask me, okay honey, we have a Vogue 2018 which costs 26 million shillings. I love it and I love driving in it, but my husband, how did we get here? No one questions. So long as you're riding in a Jaguar and you're my wife or girlfriend, you are happy without asking, how did we get here? Eventually, when it catches up with us, we are a mess.
Right.
What is exhibiting at the Kenya the KPLC is not new, but it is what we are fixing one block at a time. It is what has started with CS Rotich, so that people can learn that if we can come for the big fish, or ye small fish, you are done and dusted. But until we see convictions, we want to see people jailed, and I hope that the president of the Court of Appeal, my good friend William Ouko, the president, of the High Court, Lydia Achode, whenever they are called to empanel these benches that will deal with corruption, or the head of anti-corruption court division, they will get people who have been tested and tried, who can neither be bought nor sold, as Ellen Goldhamon White says.
Yeah, and hopefully this whole menace, corruption, basically is what you're talking about, is dealt with in this administration. And if not, that we can only hope that the next administration takes it up. But that concludes our segment of the Week in Review. A very robust panel, very good opinions, and of course, Kit gets you thinking about